大家好，我中文名是夏可，夏天的夏，可以的可。我在北京待了7年多，但是我真的很久没说中文，怕我都忘了怎么说，所以我会用英文来介绍一下这个项目。Tom Shugg's my name, everyone. I've only spoken Chinese at a conference in Australia once before. I didn't tell the organisers in advance, and they came on stage thinking I was having a stroke halfway through. So this is already going a lot better than I expected, except my clicker. Here we go. So Meg Languages, we're very fortunate to be a part of what is an incredible legacy program from the Victorian Department of Education in the Victorian Young Leaders to China program. As you've heard, historically this is an offline program, it's an in-country program, so part of the challenge for Meg was we get excited about languages, as you might have guessed from our name, but we also get excited about technology and how technology can be used to really amplify the learning of languages and also be used to amplify the way we forge cultural connections and the way we create collaboration. So we really wanted to put our heads together to think, how can we make this online version of the program really resonate and draw strong parallels to maybe what might be the strongest elements of an in-country program. So before I go into how we went about that, I just wanted us to hear from one of the students that participated in Victoria, Arjun.
Hi, my name is Arjun. Last year I participated in the VYLC program. This program got to meet lots of new people. I got to enhance my Chinese vocabulary, and I also got to participate in some virtual reality games. I really enjoyed just meeting lots of new people around Victoria, and I feel like it was a really good experience for me. 我很开心参加这个项目，谢谢。
Thank you, Arjun. So it was one of obviously hundreds of students to go through the program last year. Look, as we mentioned, historically, VYL, or Victorian Young Leaders to China program, it involves students getting on an aeroplane, they're going over to China and they're having this incredible immersive experience for a number of weeks. So part of the challenge when we're moving a program like that online is, how do we preserve the integrity of what makes that program really special? How do we make sure that it continues to really nurture important collaboration between Victorian students and Chinese students? So in terms of what my team did, we wanted to build something that was going to add an additional element to that online and hopefully draw parallels to in-country. We needed to ask ourselves a couple of questions. How can students develop real-world connections in an online environment? It sounds fairly obvious, but I don't think you can really answer that question until you've answered another question, which is what makes in-country immersion the gold standard, which it's generally considered to be. This actually took me back to my own personal experience. I moved to Nanjing as an 18-year-old. I didn't speak any Chinese. Of course, I needed to learn in order to get around. And I still remember the very first phrase that I learned was 厕所在哪儿? Which to the non-Chinese speakers in the room means, where is the toilet? And the reason I needed to ask that question is I really needed to go to the toilet. So there's this concept of urgency. Urgency is a fantastic motivator for learning a language. So in terms of what we were building, we wanted to make sure that it had this element of urgency within it so we could hopefully prompt some similar type of language exchanges. The other principle that we wanted to borrow from was that of incidental conversation. Now, one of the great advantages of being in China, of walking through the streets of Beijing as a student across the day, is you get to have all of these random interactions that prompt incidental conversations. You're going to be drawn out of your comfort zone to practice speaking Chinese. And often, separate to just the language improvement that occurs from that, it's often where the spark and motivation and passion for a language and a culture really comes from. So it's an immensely important factor, and again, one that we wanted to be able to include with what we were able to bring to the Victorian Young Leaders to China program. So a bit on what we actually built, or one aspect of what we provided to the program. We called it a culture quest. And what we actually did was build a 3D model of the Great Wall of China, and we created a virtual reality world that was designed for hundreds of students participating in VYL, or Victorian Young Leaders to China program, to come into the space. They could hear each other, they could see each other, and they could talk to each other. Now, this particular quest was called Zodiac Chase because you also required to locate all 12 animals of the Chinese zodiac that were scattered throughout the map, and you also needed to complete various cultural challenges and linguistic challenges along the way in order to make your way through the quest. So it was something that we were really excited to see how it actually went with hundreds of students in the space. It was something that we had never tried before. We were very conscious of it not just being perceived as a game. When you are learning a language, and I'm sure many people in this room can relate, it's really important that you feel like you're in a safe environment. It's really important that you feel like using a language or a non-native tongue will not result in criticism or anything critical. So there's a lot of research-backed design that we put into the development of the Culture Quest to make sure that we could emulate or create that kind of environment. And one example that I like to talk of is just the creation of an avatar. You can see that a student has created a character for themselves just on the top image there. All students that participated in the Culture Quest would create this alias for themselves. They would design their own character, and the research-backed design, or the research that supports it, suggests that students are then more inclined, once in the space, to just venture a little bit beyond their standard comfort zone. And that was really important to the way we wanted people to interact with the space, and it was certainly something that we saw in both the pre and post data. You're probably all wondering what it actually looked like, so I better show you a brief little video. In the instance of the Victorian Young Leaders to China program, we would have some 100 Victorian students and 100 Chinese students enter the space at the same time, where they'd need to move around and work collaboratively. This is just a bit of a 30-second mashup, just to give you a sense of what the space looked like.
Oh my gosh! Hi! 是东南方的一个瞭望塔，在一个 watch tower 上面，我们有用的信息在那里。
So as you can imagine, we've got hundreds of school-age students within this virtual space. They're moving around at a really frenetic pace. Some are really inspired to try and complete all challenges of all 12 components of the Zodiac Chase. We've created this sense of urgency. It's really quite paramount in that the students only have an hour to actually move through as much of the space as they can, and that's amplified by the fact that they have this countdown timer on the top of your screen that is just counting backwards from 60 minutes. And yet throughout all of this, despite all that urgency that we deliberately put in there, we actually noticed that something really beautiful was happening, and it wasn't something that we'd expected, but we just noticed that, and we're walking throughout this space at the same time within our avatars, and we noticed that there's congregations of Chinese and Victorian students at various points, and they're actually distracted from the task at hand, and they're just overcome with this incredible sense of curiosity about being able to talk to each other and ask each other questions in a really unscripted, unprompted environment, but they have this opportunity to talk to each other, and often they would sit there for 10, 20 minutes just engaging in conversation and just exploring what they happen to be curious about mutually. We happen to observe just a couple of these interactions. This is just a little 10-second example which I thought I'd share.
Lamington is like a cake, and there's like jam and cream in it, and it's got a chocolate covering with coconut milk.
That sounds nice.
So, just in case the audio wasn't clear, these students just happened to be really interested in what special foods that they ate at birthday celebrations. So on the one hand, there was a lot of talk of hot pot. On the other hand, there's a lot of talk in Lamingtons and Tim Tams. I'll let you guess who was talking about what. So why is this so exciting? Well, what was actually happening here is students from China and Victoria were being distracted from the task at hand in the best possible way to engage in incidental conversations with each other. And that was just something that really meant a lot to us as far as being able to borrow what we felt were some of the strongest elements from an in-country program and being able to allow them to occur in an online environment. So it was just a really satisfying, exciting thing for us all to observe, and we know that it resonated really strongly with the students in both Victoria and China. Now, the Culture Quest was just one component of the Victorian Young Leaders to China program. I think you've got a sense through Sharon and through Maple's video as well that there are so many moving parts there. It's an incredibly robust program, and rightfully so. It's a program that the Victorian Department of Education are immensely proud of. I think more broadly, it does serve as an excellent example about what can be achieved and replicated within the Australia-China school partnership space, particularly as it relates to what we can do digitally and what we can do online. But my name's Tom Shugg. I'm going to hand things back to Sharon for a few summary remarks, but thank you for your time.